Let's talk about frame rate and why it's important to determine the right one before starting any animation project. The motion you see in front of you is not actually moving at all, but a series of images. When these images are played at high enough speed, we perceive these images as moving. Frame rate refers to the number of these images, or frames, that are displayed per second. For example, a frame rate of 24 frames per second means that 24 images are shown every second. Higher frame rates result in smoother motion, while lower frame rates can make the animation appear choppy. While working with the higher frame rates provides a smoother result, this can come at a cost. The higher the frame range means the more you have to animate, and the longer it will take to render a finished project. In a world where time is money, this can be a critical decision. So it's important to know what frame rate is required for that project and if the resources are available to complete the project at the desired quality. In Blender, you can find the frame rate and the output properties here. And under the frame rate dropdown, you'll find a number of common frame rates to choose from, including a custom field where you can type in anything you want. So if we go in and type 12 frames per second, you'll notice the bouncing ball gets slower. And if we set this to 120 frames per second, you can see how the animation goes faster. Now the reason our animation speed is changing is because when we change frame rates in the middle of a project like this, the keys stay in the frames they were created on. If you want your keys to time correctly at the new frame rate, you'll have to select them all and retime them manually. That can be a lengthy process depending on the complexity of the animation, which is why it's recommended to start in the desired frame rate before beginning a project. Blender's default frame rate is 24 frames per second. It's the most common frame rate used for animation and will be the frame rate we use for the duration of this course. When animating, it's nice to be able to work and play back in the viewport at the same frame rate that we've specified in the output settings. As you can see in the top left corner, we have some red numbers telling us that our frame rate is only playing back at about 6.5 frames per second. This signifies that there's too much information for the computer to crunch down while it's trying to show me every single frame of the animation. There's some things we can do to help solve this problem. The first thing is to try to keep the scene as simple as possible. If there are props or background elements that you don't need for the action or performance of the animation, then make sure these are hidden or turned off in the viewport. I have all these environment objects in the background on a master collection, so I'll go up in the outliner and hide and turn these off in the viewport. And as you can see from just doing this, we've doubled our viewport frame rate. Still not quite 24 frames per second, but we're seeing improvement. The next thing we can do is check the playback settings located here at the upper left corner of the timeline. By default, it's set to play every frame, which means it's going to force the computer to show you every single frame of animation. Let's now change this to frame dropping. What this is meant to do is drop frames that the computer can't calculate fast enough and keep the animation going at the set frame rate. Changing this playback setting to sync to audio also drops frames for a smoother playback, but it syncs based off the audio clock settings instead of the video clock settings like frame dropping did, which could provide a slightly better experience than the frame dropping, but it's worth trying each of these out to see which one gives a better result. However, it's important to know that both these settings are not showing you every single frame. So if you start seeing pops in your animation or something doesn't seem quite right, it's best to start looking at your animation frame by frame or do a viewport render so you can start seeing the animation to speed. Now, it'd still be great to see it playing back at a true 24 frames per second with all frames being shown. So the next thing we're going to do is apply a simplification across the entire scene. If we go into our render settings, you'll find this checkbox to simplify. Let's check it on, and you'll see we have some viewport options. If we take this max subdivisions all the way to 0, it will turn off the subdivision modifiers across the scene. And right away, as you can see, we are getting a full playback of 24 or 25 frames per second. There are some other options below this, so if you have a particle simulation, you can turn down the children of that simulation. If we have a volume in the scene, we can turn the resolution down. You can see we have controls over what's in our viewport and what is actually rendered. So if you wanted to lower the subdivisions for your render, you would adjust these numbers here. When you're ready to do a viewport render, I would recommend unchecking simplify and then do the render and then check it back on if you were to continue with the animation afterwards.